Second session of the day. It's on digital forensics in the cloud, mobile, and social environment. As you're aware, the digital forensics is a rapidly growing field that the law enforcement and corporate investigators primarily focus on acquisition, preservation, and analysis of digital evidence obtained from digital devices in a manner that is legally acceptable in the court of law. The digital forensic field is constantly subjected to new research methodologies, tools, and techniques as a result of ever-increasing adoption of complex communication networks, use of smartphones to access social media networks. With the adoption of the cloud computing, the preservation of the data in the cloud has posed a great challenge in an investigation for the investigators until the data can be identified and retrieved. To discuss about the challenges and opportunities of performing digital forensics in social, mobile, and cloud environment, we have an eminent panel from law enforcement, corporate, and forensic vendor community. It's my privilege to welcome Dr. M.M. Oberoi to chair this session. And I would also like to welcome the panelists for this session, Mr. Paul Black, APAC Regional Managing Founder and Managing Director, Verizon, Mr. Alok Gupta, Founder and Managing Director, Pyramid Cyber Security and Forensic Limited, Mr. Samir Dutt, Director, Forensic Guru.
Good morning, friends. I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to interact with all of you on this important topic, and especially in the august company of such illustrious panelists, co-panelists. What I plan to do here is to give a perspective from the law enforcement side, the perspective of an investigator. And by that perspective, basically what I mean is to lay down the problems and leave the other panelists to come out with solutions from the industry perspective. As all of you are aware, with the advent of cloud, social media, and mobiles, there has been an entire paradigm shift with regard to forensic requirements of an investigator. The requirements as well as the expectations, but probably they have not been fully translated into the changed methodologies, changed legal system, as well as changed tools which are available to tackle the new paradigm. There are many challenges which the new environment poses. Besides technical challenges, the environment also poses legal as well as organizational challenges. The most important being the technical challenges to deal with this shift. And I'll just list down our problems in form of challenges in terms of collection of evidence, acquisition in a multi-tenant, multi-owner, and multi-jurisdictional environment. Then challenge of segregation of evidence, challenge of time synchronization in the, especially when we are dealing with multiple time zones, challenge of maintaining data integrity, and more importantly, demonstrating it to the court that it has been maintained. Challenge with dealing with various data storage and data wiping policies of cloud service providers and how they can impact the recovery of deleted data from the cloud. Challenge of isolating the incident challenge of encryption, key management, log management, and most importantly, volatile data acquisition when there has been proliferation of various endpoints. Then, especially with regard to mobile data, challenge which has been posed by new chipsets, new mobile phones, which keep on coming every day. And coming to the legal challenges, the multi-jurisdictional environment which has been bothering us with regard to cybercrime, this challenge grows manifold when we talk about cloud and social media. The multi-jurisdictional leads to multiple legal regimes. There has to be some kind of synchronization between various regimes. For example, if I collect data as per procedure in my country and send it to another country, will it be acceptable in that country because it has been collected in a particular manner, which is consistent to one legal regime, whether it would be consistent with the other legal regime where it is going to be presented. This issue, as far as I know, we have attempted one Budapest Treaty relating to Council of Europe, restricted to a few countries, but every day we are, as investigators, facing the problem of obtaining data from another state, where each country defines the requirement as per their own perspective. For example, if there's a riot in India caused by some social media post, which is maybe critical of a religion or a race or something, it might be termed only as a defamatory thing and not a high priority in some of the jurisdictions, whereas it can result in our country, which is multicultural and very sensitive to certain things, into riots leading to even deaths of many people. So the perspective changes. As a result, the responses also change. There is no consistency in these responses. How do we challenge this in a cloud environment? Then the issue of who owns the data, which still has not been answered. If I'm sending a mail from Delhi to my colleague Sandeep, again based in Delhi, using a yahoo.com server. He receives the mail in Delhi, I send the mail from Delhi, yahoo.com server is based in US. So who owns the data? Is the ownership defined by the place where it is stored, or is it defined by the person who has sent the data and person who is supposed to receive the data? As of now, it is totally dependent upon who has the control over data, which is in form of a storage media. So these are issues. Then how do we handle the privacy requirements in a multi-tenant situation? How, if is my data threatened by an act of a co-tenant? Privacy of my data, how does it get affected because of a wrongdoing of my co-tenant in a cloud situation? Then similarly, in terms of organizational challenge, who's responsible for it? Who's accountable for this? Because there is in a cloud kind of a situation, we are seeing a split of responsibilities as well as accountabilities between various actors. And there is not, all these things are not very transparent. And it's very difficult to fix the accountability in this regard. So these are some of the challenges, some of the problems which come to my mind. How do we tackle these, and how do we obtain answers to these issues? That is one area which I think some of my co-panelists would be able to answer and thereby help us in tackling these issues. So I know most of you are not interested in hearing problems and would rather like to hear solutions. So I'll leave my introduction to this and I invite Alok to present some of the solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oberoi. Good morning, everybody. So he set the tone on, what are the challenges and what are the issues which, as investigators or forensic experts or the law enforcement or even judiciary, are really bothered about. So I will, give a perspective from my end, and then I think the other panelists can also give their perspective, and then we can, we can have more question answers coming up. So first, let me, say that the whole IT industry is vouching for something known as SMAC. SMAC is social, mobility, analytics, and cloud. So if anybody in IT industry is in these four spaces, they have a future set out. And I think that's also leading to the cyber criminals and the fraudsters to leverage some of the growth which is happening in these areas. So if we look at mobile in India is a revolution. All of us know it. We have 600 plus million mobile phones in India. And what I understand today is that there are about 150 million smartphones. So smartphones are virtually computers. And with an added capability of connectivity, which means you have now 3G and 4G coming in. I heard Mr. Sybil, talking about broadband for all by 2017. So that's like, everybody right in the rural will also get connected. So the issues would be that if, there is no awareness of how to make an ethical use of either a mobile or computer or any kind of an IT equipment or system, then you all get into a trouble. So I'll talk about some of the challenges which can be overcome by what the mobile forensics is trying to do. So mobile forensics is a very complex, business from the forensic community perspective because the landscape keeps on changing. We all know that China is a manufacturing hub for the world. However, China is not just an outsourcer for manufacturing, but they also manufacture a lot of stuff which they sell in the market out. So the issues are that they come up with their own operating systems, which does not even have the APIs known to many people. They come up with their own chipsets, where the architecture of those chipsets is not even available. So in the mobile forensic, there are three methods of acquisition. One is the logical acquisition, which is fairly simple because what happens is that every time an operating system comes up, they create some kind of application programming interfaces, and through these APIs, the mobile forensic tools can pick up a lot of data which is logical. However, there are certain things which could be also extracted from the file systems. So if you do extraction from the file system, then also you can get a lot of valuable data. The issue is today that the data is not just sitting in the data storage or the flash, it is also sitting in the applications. For example, a WhatsApp would carry a lot of data. So the issues would be that I need to pick up data both from the applications as well as from the mobile storage. The third method, which is more, more complex and also more useful for the forensic community, is the physical extraction. What it means is that one is able to pick up the bit-by-bit information as we normally do in the computer forensic space, and then we are able to recover a lot of deleted information. We are also able to recover something which we could not catch from the API using the logical method. So these are some of the things which mobile forensic can achieve. Although the challenge is growing, and as somebody said in the opening sessions yesterday, that the bad guys are ahead than the good guys, and we'll have to do the catch-up. So we'll have to think beyond what typically anybody the bad guys are thinking like. So that's my bit of perspective on the mobile. But on the cloud side, Mr. Oberoi really talked about the challenges, which are who owns the data, data segregation, hypervisity, right? Because everything is virtualized today. So if it's like a virtual machine where you're putting, where an operating system, several operating systems are sitting and then they're talking to the same host or the same processor or the same memory. So it's like fooling the operating system saying that the entire resources are available with me, however, they are all in a shared mode. So how do you do investigations in such situation? Jurisdiction is a big problem. because if I'm a multinational, and if I have my data centers or my cloud sitting in several geographies, then which IT law applies there? Which country's jurisdiction applies there? More importantly, data privacy is a big issue for many countries, especially after the the NSA and the many other things which we are seeing. People are worried about data privacy. So if I'm hosting my data on a Dropbox, then the custodian is a Dropbox. And does Dropbox sign service level agreements which says that in case of an investigation, am I liable to share your data if you are not the one who's under ambit? So these are some of the challenges which are getting overcome now. So I would like to talk about one more thing, that we need to move towards standardization. And I was really looking at some of the standards which are already in place. So there is an ISO community which is called ISO 27035, which is a standard for incident management. Then there is a new standard which has come up for the digital forensic collection and preservation, which is a standard called 27037. And then for analysis, there is another standard which is called 27042. And all these three standards tied together, the incident management, the collection, and the analysis, is also overlapped by another standard which is called 27041. And this standard actually defines what are the suitability and the admissibility of the evidence in case of an investigation. So with that, I'll hand over to Paul now to give his perspective.
Sure. What I'd like to touch on is just some of the issues around, I guess, the use of social media and cloud also, which obviously there's overlaps between the two. Just perhaps by a show of hands, can I just ask how many organizations within this room have a social media policy? Sure. So perhaps half? And I'd just be interested to know just how tight those policies are in terms of, can you use social media within certain boundaries on corporate devices, or is it something that is completely banned if you identify yourself to the agency that you work for, or the organization that you work for?
I'm from ADB, so it's on a business, case-by-case basis that you can use social media.
Sure, and presumably you need to identify yourself as a user as a member of your organization?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's interesting the different stances organizations are taking on social media and the use of social media. We've seen some real horror stories in the news around misuse of social media and continue to see that. And for me, I don't think there's necessarily a technical solution to the challenge of social media. I think a lot of the challenges come back to policy and staff and user awareness around social media. More and more organisations that we're dealing with are now enforcing staff to sign the social media policy, to the extent where we're dealing with companies now who LinkedIn is a real challenge for organisations in terms of I may have a huge network of customers which traditionally in times gone by may have been kept in a filing cabinet, all of those contact details, which clearly was the ownership of the organisation. LinkedIn and other social media, particularly business social media systems, obviously blur those boundaries, and a member of sales staff moving from company A to company B, he doesn't give up his personal LinkedIn account when he walks out of the door, and sure enough, that entire sales database or customer contact database walks out of the door with him. So more and more we're seeing organisations enforce policies which require staff to disclose LinkedIn accounts when they commence with an organisation, and then to have it signed over towards the end of their employment as they walk out the door. I'm not saying it's necessarily a great solution, but I think it's it's a way which some organisation, a path which some organisations are taking in terms of controlling the use of social media, particularly in the context of business information and business contacts.
Thanks, Paul. Good morning, everyone. And it's really good to see so many people interested in forensics. You know, we were a very forlorn science at one point of time. I remember in the early 1990s, you know, a hall like this would perhaps have, 5, 6 people sitting and wondering, who have wandered in from somewhere, and they would say, forensic, arsenic, forsenic, what is it? That's why they were there. So it's good. Technology is progressing, and we're all interested in the cloud, in social media, in mobile phones, and I'll just cover a little bit of all of these. Facebook stats, just to share a few Facebook stats with you. USA has 314 million people, that's their population, and 166 million of them are on Facebook. India has 1.2 billion people, and 63 million of them are on Facebook. And I was reading a recent Times of India article where they say that by the end of the year, which is 2013, and we are probably close to the end of the year, so we are going to be hitting 91 million social network users. That's a lot. To put it in perspective, in 2014 or 15, we expect to actually hit 243 million and beat the USA. And again, putting that in perspective, that's 10 times the population of Australia. So just think about it. We are going to have that many people using social networks. Almost 40% of those are in the 18 to 24 age group. Of course, this thing is increasing because about 15-16% are from the 25 to say 30, 34 age group. So a lot of the young people are on Facebook, and increasingly so. So that's one of the things. What about mobiles? Just to get a feel of it, we have 900 million phone users, among the world's biggest mobile phone users. And KPMG says that we have about 165 million smartphone users, people who use mobile internet. Again, that translates into a lot of data which is up there in the cloud. So what are the problems we face? I'm one of those contrarian guys, I don't go for FUD. No fear, uncertainty, doubt. So let's look at it this way. About a year ago, when we began to see a lot of cloud forensic cases starting to come in, we were also worried. We were also concerned. We were also, thinking, ab kya hoga? What's going to happen next? It's just like, whole disk encryption. It's just like, memory forensics. Things come and solutions begin to emerge. So what have we been seeing now? Essentially, the issues that we were facing, like Dr. Oberoi, very nicely pointed out, are mainly, legal issues, ownership, privacy. Those issues are really major issues. Then we also have a lack of standards and tools. Though, we have a number of universities coming out with free tools. The University of Rhode Island has come out with one. Then we have at the Black Hat 2011, there was a cloud forensic tool launched called OVADE. And then the National Institute of Justice in the US has actually launched or supported a tool called FROST, which is from the University of Maryland. So, there are a number of tools out there, but there are no standards, not yet. Then the key thing that we have is a lack of skills, training, no proper methodologies, no certifications. What I'd like to add here is that like Paul really nicely pointed out, is the issue of policies. What happens? Where are the policies? We need to have policies relating to the actual investigation of data that resides on the cloud. When I'm looking at disk forensics, when I'm looking at network forensics, what happens? I have a policy, This is how I'm going to go about it. In cloud forensics, I'm using the Amazon cloud, I'm using IBM's cloud, I'm using a lot of people's clouds, I'm using, Google's storage, I'm using the iBox, I'm using a lot of things. And my problem is that I don't own them. They're outside my premises. I don't even know where they are physically. In fact, they're virtualized. The data is constantly being, backed up in multiple locations. What am I going to do? So let's take one step back. What do we do in conventional forensics? We just have to adapt our methodologies, our procedures to look at this in a bit of a holistic manner. In conventional forensics, we say, all right, we want a bit-by-bit image of the media, for example. That's acquisition. Our issue is acquisition. Now, we don't have access to data on the cloud. Not directly. There are only two ways that we can have access to the data on the cloud ourselves. A, we own the account, so we have access. But we don't have access to what was there historically, right? Because we are not getting physical access to the media. B, we are law enforcement, and we take assistance from the service provider. Now, what does the service provider do? The service provider, per se, takes snapshots of the data. The snapshots are freezing the data in a particular point of time. Now, our service level agreement with the service provider has to include access to those snapshots on a timely basis, depending on what we plan to do. So if we have an investigation policy in place, if we have a particular strategy in place where we are going to carry out, say, forensic investigations, and believe you me, you're going to need to do this. We must have an SLA with the service provider, with the cloud service provider. Hey, we are going to need access, we're going to need snapshots in time. So that's your access at, say, perhaps deleted data, for example. The second thing is we're looking at artifacts. We like to look at registries, we like to look at, data that's residing around the place, misnamed files, hidden files, link files, things like that. So if we are planning to do that, we need to be able to access all the data that is out there, just like this one. The only aspect that we are unable to access is, the bit-by-bit, bitstream stuff that's lying over there, because we don't have physical access to the media. But we still have snapshots. So it's not the end of the world. That's what I'm trying to say. So essentially, we're able to do that. Coming back to social media. In India, with the number of social media users that we have and those that are increasing, it's a big issue. So think of it this way. Say I'm an organization, and I would like to monitor Twitter feeds. I want to figure out what's going on. Is somebody talking about my organization? Is some people, say, leaking information about my organization? Is the sentiment good about the organization? Is the sentiment bad? That kind of thing. So what happens, when the data is out there on the internet, in social media, we've got to carry out what we call internet content analytics. You see what's happening, what's trending, what's going on, and is the sentiment positive? Is the sentiment negative? What's happening? So those kind of things, say we base a few keywords. We say, all right, let's just take the elections, for example. There was a lot of social media being used extensively during the elections. So you say, all right, what's happening on Twitter? People are tweeting, let's say any tweet that contains the word Gandhi or Modi or Kejriwal, for example. We want to look at those. We say, say things like burnt out, horrible, bad, these are all negative sentiments. Excellent, positive, things like that, they're all positive sentiments. So what happens is that you can actually get a 360-degree view of what's happening in the world out there when you are looking at things like this. So these are some of the things that we need to be looking at. And essentially what happens is that when you put stuff up on your social media, on your Facebook walls, and say law enforcement gets it, we have issues of admissibility, privacy. And every step of the way, when the data is actually preserved or collected or produced, we have to, look at admissibility from all those points. Suppose this data is marked as private. Do I have permission to access it? Can I get it? In India, we don't have any kind of court rulings on this, but there's a lot of things happening in the US and other places where, very clearly, you may not be able to get access from a privacy point of view. Suppose you have a friend, somebody's friended a person on Facebook, and that person has access to certain things which are marked as private. Is that admissible in a court of law? So those kind of issues are all out there. So these are things that we need to look at. I will now leave the floor open, and we can, start addressing various issues one by one. You want to take it, sir?
Hi, Samir. Just to get a hang of how big the problem is, let's say a cyber crime has been committed. Maybe its origin was in cyberspace on a endpoint computing device, and maybe the target or the victim of that cyber crime also that the negative delivery payload was delivered on an endpoint computing device. So for a forensics person, where does your focus or most of your effort go in searching out the target device and doing forensics on that device, or doing the forensics on the device from where this attack or the cyber crime originated?
I'll take an attempt first. From the investigator point of view, till we have identified the actual person who initiated, the focus is on the target device to get leads to the device which has initiated it. Once we have identified, then to collect evidence against the criminal, our attention would be on the device which initiated.
So with the growing numbers of these smartphones, which are small gadgets, like if a car was used to commit a crime, you could probably lay your hands on that car, find it. But with the smartphone or a handheld device being the origin of that cyber crime, it would be absolutely certain that it could be very easily.
We face this problem all the time, and I agree. There are two kinds of scenarios here. One is, say, a corporate environment where you have a BYOD kind of a thing, and the other is what the law enforcement kind of a situation is. In a corporate environment, you have a mobile management platform. You have a MDM kind of a system where you may have agents deployed, and there are tools available out there, and today that's fairly commonplace, where you have agents deployed on every phone that you, as a corporate, allow on your networks or allow on your systems, so to speak. So there, data and evidence is going to exist, on the target phone, should I say, the victim, the MDM, and of course on the perpetrator's device. Now, we may not have access to the perpetrator's device. However, we will have access to the other two. So this is in a corporate environment. Let's go to the law enforcement environment. The law enforcement environment is limited to the victim and the suspect and the intermediary service providers. So what is going to happen is that the law enforcement is going to say, raise an issue with a particular service provider. Look, this particular phone was accessed by this device. And let me tell you, it's not easy, if you're even carrying out forensics of a mobile device, to identify where this particular incident has occurred from. When you do a trace back and you try and identify, and if that particular person who's committed the crime has sort of hacked into a phone, for example, or perhaps the things were, and we have seen cases where new phones have been supplied with malware pre-installed and then remotely accessed at a later date. So, special pricing, promotional pricing, please buy kind of a thing. So you tend to, think, okay, we are doing a bulk buy, we are getting a good price. And what you're doing is actually opening your, or exposing your network. So in that kind of a situation, the next stage comes in that, look, this is the system that is being accessed. This is where it was being accessed from, and we need the service provider to tell us what was going on at that time. So then again, it's as corporates, as individuals, we can't do it, but law enforcement comes into the picture. Yeah, Paul.
And I think just to add to that, the challenge often is the time, the time issue. So clearly the place to start is with the victim machine, because that is most often what we have accessible and available to us. And then obviously to work back from there, as Samir mentioned. The challenge comes when we need to get information from providers, from networks. If it's a civil case, we need to go through civil courts to obtain that. That's very expensive to start getting court orders, and it's a time-consuming issue as well. If we're talking about mobile devices, the costs of mobile devices these days, they're disposable. I don't know what a mobile device goes for in India, but I'm quite sure it's 600-700 rupees. You can probably get a mobile device very, very easily disposable, and with the time lapse between the going through the court process or the legal process, that phone's long gone. So it's a question of working with what we have, which is most often the device which has been targeted, and potentially the information within that corporate network, so the network which has been attacked.
So I would like to add one thing. In India, and I can talk about India, the Department of Telecom has come up with a mandate now, which has been given to all the operators to deploy something known as location-based security. What it means is that even if your phone is not a GPS-ready phone, because GPS is something which is a user switchable feature, so they could locate you within a 50-meter accuracy, right, in urban areas, in dense urban areas, and they could locate you at 150 meters in the semi-urban areas, and up to about 500 meters in the rural areas. Now that is possible if they deploy these triangulation methodologies inside their network. So that is only possible if you are able to know from the IMEI and IMSI numbers from the operator that this is the mobile which we are trying to locate or track or go behind. Then a combination of location-based security, then the manufacturer who's giving the IMSI and the IMEI number, and the IMSI which the operator controls, and the law enforcement then can chase all these people, both from an intelligence perspective as well as from an investigation perspective.
Just to add to that, this kind of thing is actually out of the reach of most corporates. The location-based thing is meant specifically just for law enforcement. And it is also currently being used to a certain extent. All the triangulation methodologies are all being used now. But I don't think that the corporates are going to be able to get their hands on it. So you have to use different methods.
The IMEI number can be spoofed, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, even the MACs can be spoofed. Yeah.
Just a clarification. LBS is mandated by DOT that it should be available for law enforcement agencies. But mandate is there. We do not have the access to that because service providers still have not installed those.
Okay. No, you're right, Mr. Oberoi, but we have low accuracy stuff available. It's not high accuracy. That's the only thing.
In urban areas, 500 meters does not make any sense.
Correct, absolutely.
Good morning, sir. I'm Kusmakar from NPA. In case of any evidence, my question is to Dr. Oberoi. In case of any evidence, anything related to cloud, let's say Yahoo, let's assume or Gmail is a cloud, and and we have evidence sufficient enough to give in a court that these are the write-ups or either a series of mails which proves some crime or something like that. In that case, also you have to approach to Gmail or Yahoo or whatever to certify it kind of as expert opinion, or is it sufficient to just produce either soft or hard copy of those evidences?
You see, it depends upon how have you obtained those things. Is it, those been disclosed by the accused? Then it would be hit by the, unless it is a leading kind of a 27 Evidence Act disclosure. Otherwise, it won't be admissible. Or who has given you access to those accounts?
I think you're talking about the password, sir?
Yeah.
Suppose I write in the case diary that either the accuser confessed that this is the password, or I have got the access to the password through some other means. So whatever, I mean, you know
that
what
is
I'm
critical. Confession is not admissible. So if it is, you have, maybe if you have found a slip on which the password was scribbled, and then you, on the basis of that, you have, then it would be admissible if taken out in presence of independent witnesses. But if it is given by accused and it leads to a material discovery, a discovery which is material to the case, then also it is admissible.
It will be admissible under 27 Evidence
Yeah.
Act, okay. Not under 25.
So does that, sorry. I'll ask this question. So does that mean that if somebody writes a password on a piece of paper or on a diary and leaves it on his table, that allows the law enforcement to open the account and get right in?
No comprehension.
164, again, you do 164 for witnesses, not accused. For accused, it has to be confession, which is admissible only in certain cases. Maybe like if we are using Macoca, then under 18 Macoca, it is admissible. So it's admissible only for some acts, but not for routine crime. And as far as the discovery of passwords, the excess, that is I won't like to comment on that right now.
Okay, hi, I'm Rohit from Attentive. We actually operate in healthcare and hence are compliant to HIPAA. So my question is, do we need something in place already so that if there's a breach happens and you guys come for forensics, I should have some stuff ready for that? For example, I might turn on logging in advance so that you can come and grab the evidences much more quickly. So in terms of readiness for forensics, do you recommend corporates doing something in advance?
HIPAA mandates that your C-level officers sign off on a regular basis that you have done everything possible, you know, and forensics is definitely part of everything possible. So you need to have that. Quite honestly, across the globe, corporations that are affected by HIPAA have this in place. So you should definitely look at it. Yes.
Yeah, just one thing I want to add here. See, the breaches, which is incident management, I mean the security, continuous monitoring and forensics, it's a convergence over there now. Because from a GRC perspective, from a compliance perspective, you need to have all the three things being available. So while the, you know, and I'm going to talk about the cloud side of it, while people are building their cloud architecture right now, I think they have to build the investigative architecture and the forensic architecture as part of that. Because if you build an architecture for cloud and if it's an afterthought for you, then it'll be too difficult to embed, you know, investigation and forensics at a later stage.
I'm Sanjay Sharma from Tata Consultancy Services, and I have a question for Dr. M.M. Oberoi. Sir, other than the traditional practices in forensics, we also have practices like live forensics, wherein we will actually go in for artifacts which exist in production servers critically important. So in that case, can you throw some light on the admissibility of the evidence in the court of law?
They're perfectly admissible. There's no problem with, if we have seized as per proper procedure, we have witnesses to prove the seizure, we have technical data to support that it has been accurately seized and there has been no interference, then they are perfectly admissible. There's no problem in that.
But sir, the methodology would differ to a great extent.
That is the problem, the standardization of the procedures and what are the forensic standards. That is what everybody has been pointing out, that there is a problem in terms of laying down the standards, how the evidence has to be collected, what is the procedure. And different law enforcement agencies, different companies, they are using different standards and different mechanisms to do that. So till it is standardized, I'll say that the way I have done is right.
Thank you, sir.
I think there's actually a big beat up about what's admissible and when evidence will not be admissible. You know, as Dr. Oberoi said, providing that principles have been followed and that a methodology has been used which is recognised by the courts, it doesn't matter whether that's been done by an expert who has 15 years of forensic experience or a trained IT consultant who perhaps has other roles within the organisation. I think it's really built up to be a big thing that unless it's been done by X, Y, Z qualified individual, it cannot be admissible. It can. It's just it's a question of having the policies and the training and the understanding in place before you have an incident. So the worst place to be is you have an incident and then you're trying to work out how you should be responding and how you should be collecting evidence. If you have incident response plans, policies in place which set out and describe to a fairly prescriptive about the process that needs to be followed, I don't see that as an issue. And I haven't seen evidence thrown out where where process has been followed and people have used appropriate methodology regardless of their experience. I think the analysis, yes, perhaps if expert witness evidence is being given, clearly you need to have a credentialed expert, a well-credentialed and experienced expert who can give opinion on what particular data means. But in terms of collecting evidence, I don't see admissibility to be a huge challenge if you've got the processes and the training in place.
So I'll just add two more things. One is that chain of custody is important as in case of any other evidence collection. And second is that judiciary need to be made aware that this process, or whatever, it may be an ISO process, as an indigenized ISO process or in your own India standards, is followed in the whole process of investigation and analytics, then I think there should not be a problem in admissibility of such an evidence. But with proper documentation, yeah.
So I have a question. Yeah, this is Manoj from Infosys. Now, this is a little bit of a mix of forensics plus legal. Yeah. Now we had a query regarding what if somebody sends a mail from Gmail, it hops across different servers across the globe and then reaches a recipient and so on. When we know that when we investigate, we can see, we can trace back through the ISPs to the IP address and hence the sender and so on. But in the IT Act, we have a section where we say that the digital signatures are what would actually prove the authenticity of the sender. Yeah, and a while back you also mentioned about confession need not be taken as a need not be admissible in the court of law. So how do we mix this up to really track down or make find the real person?
No, I don't think that as per IT Act, digital signatures are essential for attribution of a normal mail. They are not essential. If we can prove with sufficient circumstantial evidence that this mail account was being used by XYZ, then that is sufficient to prove that. Because most of the mail users may be using them without digital signatures.
That's right.
So if there has to be sufficient evidence to be circumstantial evidence which we can always collect if we get access to. That is where we need the support of service providers, who are the email service providers, and if we can get access to the previous mails, the context, and then that is from them we can prove circumstantially that this is the mail which is was being used by XYZ. Then other places where he might have given his email address, maybe on visiting cards or somewhere else. So those things are relevant, and we, on the basis of these circumstances, we prove that he was a person behind this mail.
have a question for Dr. Oberoi. So you are leading...
Maybe we are last two questions?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay, great, thanks. The key word coming out of the discussions over is policy. And like you said, the challenges which you face or what you do is the best. Anybody else will be doing something else. Now, very basic question is that why is it such a big challenge not to create a policy which could be around 30-40 pages? And there are monthly meetings with the MHA. All DGs from all over the country come over there. And anyone can be given a responsibility that, okay, put out a bulletin board, put everything over there, and get one stenographer to just put it all together.
I wish it was as simple as that. No, the issue is when we were pointing out about standardization of policies has roots in the multi-jurisdictional nature. The policies which I may have in India may not be matching with policies which are available in USA. Secondly, as far as within India, there have been attempts, even Data Security Council of India has come out with standards, how the evidence has to be collected. So there are documented standards, but there are many gray areas which have not been covered by those policies. And with cyber area, every day we have a new situation and which may not have been defined by policies. But the issue, the main problem area here is that if I'm getting evidence from outside where my policy, it has not been collected as per my policies, does it become irrelevant? There have been Supreme Court judgments. I can cite one case in the Parliament attack case. There was a judgment that evidence was collected in a wrongful manner. And it was a much more serious issue in terms of getting evidence from interceptions which were not properly authorized. And the court has ruled that even if it has been collected in a wrongful manner, it calls for action against people who collected it in wrongful manner, but it does not dilute the evidentiary value of those evidence. So those things are there, but then they have always been debated.
I agree with you, sir, on that. And I do know about the existence of the DSCI manual also. There are two more manuals. One is from AS. So there are two or three manuals which are floating around the country. Yeah. Okay, like you said very correctly, again, here they are documents which have been printed, and they are, they just stand in time over there. They don't move. They are not dynamic. And the dynamism of cybercrime or cyber security or whatever is on a daily basis. My point is just on that count, is that any one agency, there are all the states, all DGs get together, they all have the same problem. Any one agency can be given, I can do it for you. You just set up one dynamic portal, okay. There are certain things which will not change at all. They will stand in time. There are certain things which will change. Whatever it changes, the officers who are trained can be on a mailing list and can be, we have to use those tools. I don't know why we don't use that. We sit and we hash the same problem all over again. Whereas the solution can be the most simple solution in the world, we don't look at that. That's the only point I wanted to make.
I agree with you. I differ with that.
I have one question, sir, regarding investigation. Sir, I have a question from the investigation perspective. Now, especially in respect of the law enforcement. Now, you may actually come across situations where there could be blatant sharing of credentials for a user ID, say, for example. And you don't know what is the number of people who have actually shared the credentials. So when you actually reach through your forensic methodology to the user or maybe to a machine, does the onus lie on the prosecution to prove who the person was, that is relate the user to the person, or it is the persons in question who have to actually disprove that because of some alibi or something that they were actually not the people?
I'll explain this in the context of a recent case, a very well publicized case that was seeking CDR details, call detail records of Mr. Arun Jaitley. It is a well discussed case. In this case, the authorized person was a ACP of a subdivision who had shared his, and the CDR can be called from a official email, and this official email was of a ACP. The passwords were shared with constable who had shared with his friend, and then it went out. And when we investigated this case to fix the responsibility, in the criminal case, we also have to fix the mens rea. which is a very important part. ACP has shared the password, but there was no mens rea to invade the privacy of the individual. So he is liable for a different kind of action. He is not liable for criminal prosecution. And the onus as such, if he is not aware, he cannot help us. I can keep on telling him, tell me who has used this ID. If he is not aware, he cannot help me. That is for the investigators to find out who had access to this, how has he used. There are tools for finding it out. But not taking due diligence in keeping the credentials safe cannot be a ground for criminal prosecution.
Thank you, sir.
There was a very interesting case, where Facebook accounts were being cited as evidence. This was a matrimonial dispute case where the wife was claiming that the husband, was carrying out some violence against the wife. And one of the Facebook posts by the husband was that I'm really sorry I hit you and things like that, Now, the case rested on the fact that the husband claimed that, look, both of us had each other's Facebook IDs and passwords. So we both had access to the same accounts, and this post has not been put there by me. So things can get really tricky at times. So you really have to prove who the person behind the issue is. And a lot of stuff goes into that. That's what forensics is all about.
I think we'll close it here, and just as a parting note, I'll like to illustrate the difference in perspectives. Alok ji mentioned about social, mobile, analytics and cloud. Maybe if there was somebody from law enforcement, he would have changed the order. Social, cloud, analytics and mobile. Scam might have been a more appropriate.
Thank you, panel.